Are we all ready?
Ready.
Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry about the change of time for this meeting, but we had a clash of meetings this morning and we can only stream one meeting live at a time. So in order to make sure that we maintained our public presence, we moved it to this afternoon. So I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. Due to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the provisions set out in the local authorities and police and crime panels coronavirus flexibility of local authority and police and crime panel meetings, England and Wales, regulations 2020, and with Cambridgeshire County Council's own virtual meetings protocol. A decision summary and minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the meetings page of the council website. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the committee to keep their video cameras switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep their microphone muted except when I invite them to speak. Any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate by clicking the raised hand function on the right hand side of their screen, and there'll be no points of order or personal explanation. I would ask for your patience if we run into technical problems, and should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting will be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. Please also note that to facilitate discussion, I intend to waive the committee procedure rule, limiting members' contributions to 5 minutes. I also propose to allow members to speak more than once on each item, if appropriate. Members, I'll begin by calling the names of all members of the committee to establish your presence. So please respond as I call your name. Councillor Batchelor.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Costello.
Present.
Councillor Cuffley.
Present.
Councillor French.
Present.
Councillor Machini.
Present.
Councillor Nieto, I know is going to be slightly late, so we'll await her arrival. Councillor Smith.
Present.
And Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor. Are you still with us, Councillor Taylor, Amanda?
Chairman, Amanda has just texted me saying she's not sure her sound is working, but I think she is here, albeit the sound isn't functioning.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. And myself, Councillor Criswell. So we move to item 1, which is firstly apologies for absence. Nick?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Every and Councillor Cuffley. Cuffley is substituting in her place, and Councillor Nieto has just arrived, and Councillor Ashwood gave apologies as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was just looking for Councillor Nieto. Councillor Nieto, Lena, welcome. We've just done the those that are present, so can we just confirm you're present, please?
Yes, present. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we move on to declarations of interest, members. Do any members have any interest to declare? I see nobody indicating, so I'll assume that's not, but I do have an interest to declare in agenda item 5, the Capital Fund. Woodhurst Village Hall is in my division, so I will abstain on voting at that item. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 2, which is minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of May. We're being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting as a correct record. Can I ask any member who does not agree with the proposal to approve the minutes to use the raised hands function, please? Okay, I see nobody raising, so we'll take those minutes as read, and I'll make sure I sign them when I'm first able to do so. So item 2B is the action log. Adrian, are there any updates to the action log since the last publication, please?
Thank you, Chairman. No further updates since the published version. The only outstanding items now are those that will be resolved as we return to normal business. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on the action log, members? Okay, I see no one indicating, so thank you very much. We'll move on. Item 3, we have no public questions or petitions. So we'll move on to the next item, which is item 4. And it's the, the Council's response to COVID-19. Given the rapidly changing situation and the need to provide the committee and public with the most up-to-date information possible, I've accepted this as a late report in order to allow it to contain the most up-to-date information possible and to enable the committee to be briefed on the current situation in relation to the Council's response to COVID-19 for those services which it is responsible. Adrian, can you introduce the report, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. As before, the report sets out a brief bit of background information for you, and then what we've done in section 2 is to split the report into 2 parts. The first part deals with items that relate to our business as usual responsibilities, and then the second part of the report deals with the work of the county-wide COVID-19 coordination hub. So I'll just briefly pick out some key points, if I may, and go straight in to section 2, and particularly section 2.5 and 2.6. Just to highlight the fact that, and I'm sure you're all very aware of this already, but the government have lifted the restrictions on registrations of births. I'm really pleased to say we were amongst the top 5 councils in the country to relaunch our registration service, which is a fantastic achievement in most venues across the county. We're making our way through the 1,600 births that formed the backlog by increasing the staffing levels and making sure that we are as efficient as we can be, whilst also maintaining appropriate social distancing for both the staff and for that matter, for new parents and newborn children. So it's going very well. No big issues to speak of. The other change that was made by the government was that marriage and civil partnership notices could also be registered. We didn't launch that to begin with, but that service has now begun. Unfortunately and frustratingly, there is still no firm announcement on ceremonies, either weddings, civil partnership ceremonies or citizenship ceremonies, which I know was a particular area of concern at our last committee meeting. But we stand ready to deliver those services once we get the green light. And then at 2.6, in relation to the coroner service, we are planning to begin coronial services in full again from the 1st of July. And I think, again, we'll be amongst the first in the country to be able to do so. Obviously, and very sadly, there is an additional backlog in that service as well, in the same way that there were for birth registration. So we've worked hard to increase capacity for inquests to be heard, and have now sourced 2 venues rather than just trying to operate from one. As we all know, the faster we can move through that backlog, the faster the closure for the families as far as possible. So that's our biggest priority, really, is to make those inquests as pain-free as possible under the circumstances. So they're really the only updates I wanted to provide on the service side, the business as usual side. At our next committee, very early July, it's only 2 weeks away, I'd like to talk more about recovery of business as usual services, things like our library service, our skills service, those sorts of services that we haven't really spoken a great deal of, but a great deal of work is happening to stand those services up, ready to begin operating. And so that will be a particular focus of next month's committee report. Obviously happy to take any questions on that today. So if I can move you now to section 2.7, and this is the particular updates on the COVID coordination and response hub. As always, this deals with the County Council's response, but we do form part of a network of other hubs that are led by the district and city councils across Cambridgeshire. And it's an incredible partnership. It's really stood up at speed, and our district and city partners are doing an exceptional job. So whilst this only looks at this through the lens of the County Council, I think it is important just to acknowledge the incredible work that our district colleagues and city council colleagues are also providing. So at 2.7.2, you can see that the number of people who are shielded and have registered continues to increase, nearly 3,000 increase since the last report was published. You may also be aware and have seen in the media in the last couple of days several stories about the status of the shielding programme. And sadly, I haven't got anything to officially report today on what's going to happen next for people that need to shield. There were several articles circulating in the press yesterday that suggested that shielding would change towards the end of July. We do anticipate a change coming, and I because actually the official ending of shielding is the end of June, and I had hoped that by time of committee we would have heard from government about how that would look, but we're not quite there yet. So I'm now assured that I'll be involved in a regional pool next week, which means that hopefully for our committee in early July I'll be able to update you fully on what's happening. What I will say is, for your reassurance, if there is a change to the shielding programme, which means people no longer need to shield, we will not simply walk away from providing them with support, because for 12 weeks, these people will have benefited from, where necessary, not everybody, but where necessary, our support, the support of our network of hubs, whether that's food, access to medicines, befriending, household maintenance, and so on. And just suddenly switching that support off is not something we want to be in a position to be doing. So for your reassurance, we'll carry on providing support in whatever way is felt appropriate for as long as is necessary for the shielded population, whether or not they're still shielding. So if I move you through the report now, section 2.7.5. You may remember last month I described the situation where there are over 30,000 people in the county identified as needing to shield, and only 19,000 so far registered. So the national shielding team run by the government have been contacting the people that haven't yet registered to encourage them to do so. And where that contact fails, we are able to make our own attempts to make contact. And that's really important for us in order to make sure that those people are safe and well, that they've just chosen not to register rather than that they have misunderstood or perhaps themselves are in a poorly state. And so we continue to carry out door knocks and home visits, as well as telephone contacts to those people. You can see in the report, 1,200 since the last report of people contacted by telephone, with the remainder up to 2008 contacted by home visit, with around 50 needing urgent help. So frankly, for me, even if that number 50 was one, it would make the whole exercise worthwhile. And we've seen some incredible stories of people that have just been quite poorly, and perhaps their care or local arrangements for shopping have broken down. And through this exercise, we've been able to intervene. So incredibly worthwhile, and we'll continue to do that. At 2.7.6 also, you'll be aware that there are a number of people being removed from the shielded list. We briefly touched on this last month as well. We've got no control over that locally. This happens at a national level. And our concern really is that those people that were shielding and now have been removed for various reasons are in a similar situation to those that might be told that the shielding programme is ended. So we have made arrangements to contact those people ourselves proactively, to reach out to them, let them know they have been removed from the list, and provide short-term support until they set back up their own arrangements for shopping and household chores and so on. So quite an important function, I think, of the county-wide hub. 2.7.8 and 2.7.9, I've provided a little bit of detail around the volunteer effort that we've benefited from And to be frank, with the fantastic support of our districts and cities and our own staff, without this volume of voluntary sector support and volunteer support, we couldn't really be doing what we're doing now. And there are some incredible stats contained, particularly in 2.7.8, about the effort of our colleagues in the Red Cross, Search and Rescue, REACT, and the CAMS and Beds response group, including the number of miles and days covered. So they're distributing food and PPE right across the county 7 days a week, a phenomenal effort. At 2.7, 11 and 12, I just wanted to flag our continued work on scams and scams awareness. Very topical because we happen to be in week 1 of Scams Awareness Fortnight. And I just wanted to put on record a huge thanks to members for responding so positively to some of the scams awareness materials that we've shared with you. A lot of you have shared that material on your social media feeds and other formats, and also have signed up to the new Twitter feed. If you haven't yet, please do so, and we can happily help you to do that. But some really good work, I think, going on around scams prevention, which is such an important thing, particularly for our vulnerable residents. I'm almost there. Section 2.7.15, this starts to describe a move really away from the sort of response work we've been doing, and starts to describe the work on the NHS Test and Trace programme. Now, we're right in the middle of drafting what is required to be submitted by the end of June, and that's an outbreak control plan, outbreak management control plan. And the Director of Public Health is responsible for preparing and submitting that plan, and it's being pulled together by a wide range of colleagues and partners. And we have a significant role to play as a committee and as a directorate in ensuring that that plan is robust and stands up to support our communities, particularly in regard to 3 aspects. Firstly, for people that are contact traced, we need to be here to ensure that they can self-isolate for 2 weeks without worrying about getting food, medicines, looking after their garden, whatever other barrier there might be. We will be here along with our district and city hubs to support those people. If suddenly you're phoned by the contact tracers and told you need to self-isolate for 2 weeks, we are here to make sure that any barriers that prevent that from happening are removed. Second, if there is an outbreak, a local outbreak of COVID-19, we need to be able to work with our communities, our parish councils, our district partners and others providing voluntary support on the ground to ensure that people in that locality are aware of that outbreak and can respond appropriately, provide support to people that might be affected, but also try to prevent a further escalation of that outbreak. So that's a second important role of both this committee and of the directorate. And then thirdly, our role is more generic in terms of ensuring that all of our citizens continue to follow the guidance from the government, and particularly around social distancing. And as our towns and cities open up, we're seeing the need to really continue to stress the importance of maintaining social distance. All 3 of those important roles are, of course, all about trying to ensure we can lift as many restrictions as possible, as quickly as possible, and avoid a second spike. So our role in this is really significant. What I'd like to propose for the July committee is that I'm joined by Sue Grace, who is leading some of the work to mobilise the council's response, along with Liz Robin, on Test and Trace, and provide you with a lot more detail about the arrangements, the governance arrangements, the way that we'll manage and stand up the support that we need to put in place. Your role as both councillors, but also as committee members in relation to this committee, and how we can ensure that we are protecting our population. So with your agreement, and because the report will be submitted by the end of June, our 2nd of July committee is perfectly timed, I think, to bring you the very latest information on that programme. At 2.7.19, just wanted to flag again, the work we're doing with Cambridgeshire Acre and the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Association of Local Councils. So we're particularly focused on working with parish and town councils, and absolutely acknowledging that not every district area, of course, has a parish or town council structure, and there are other ways of working with residents associations and other groups in those patches. But where we do have parish and town councils, the response, as we all know, during COVID from those groups has been phenomenal, and an incredible amount of on-the-ground, street-level work being coordinated and delivered by parish and town councils. We want to continue to support that and enable it to happen without layering in bureaucracy. So we're working really effectively with Capalc and Cams Acre to ensure that whatever our forward plans look like, we feature very heavily the support needed for parish and town councils to continue that function. And attached to Appendix 1 is just some very high-level quotes and comments that have come out of a recent survey that we co-issued with Capalc and Acre, as well as Peterborough City Council. Amongst our parish and town councils, there was over a 50% response rate, which is great, and lots of rich data alongside those comments. Just a date for your diary as well. The 23rd of October is the confirmed date for this year's Parish Local Councils Conference. It's going to be super exciting and a fully digital conference. So it's difficult to plan for a physical event, obviously, at the moment. And whilst restrictions may be lifted by October, we need to start planning for an event like that now. So it's going to be a fully online conference on the 23rd of October, very professionally facilitated, so it won't be by me, and should be a really interesting programme of events, workshops and market stalls. So official notice and invitations will come out shortly on that. Penultimate point I'd like to draw your attention to is at section 2.7, 21 and 22. And this is the issue around the BAME community, the Black, Asian and minority ethnic community, and the well-publicised reports about the inequalities faced by this community in relation to their susceptibility to the virus. Lots of really interesting but quite stark facts now being published by Public Health England and others that show the vulnerability of this particular group of our residents. And the chairman and I have had some lengthy discussions about this issue, and almost regardless of what happens at a national level, we are obviously committed to ensuring our BAME community, by which I mean not just, I mean all different groups of our residents. So, the minority ethnic grouping is huge, and is certainly more than just the Black and the Asian community, that we want to make sure at a local level, i.e. county-wide, we're doing all we can to ensure that the BAME residents are not susceptible to those kinds of vulnerabilities, not just in relation to COVID though, because we want to be certain that this group of people are not also vulnerable to some of the issues facing some communities that are less equal than others. So those that are financially challenged, for example, or other health inequalities. So we think some of the data that's emerging from Public Health England is entirely relevant to ask the question of other issues that these communities are facing. And we're proposing to do some significant work in this area through the Tackling Poverty Working Group, which a number of you sit on. It hasn't met for some time, but we'd like to stand that group back up again. And in the next 2 or 3 weeks, arrange an initial workshop so that we can focus significantly on the BAME issue, but also really start to focus back again on inequalities, particularly poverty, but actually disadvantage generally. So for those of you on the working group, please look out for that invitation. Thanks in advance, and we'll be bringing a full report back through committee in the normal way. And just finally at 3.3, which deals with the financial consequences currently of COVID, just draw your attention really to that section and the explanation and rationale for where those costs are and loss of income are currently emanating from. Sorry, that was rather a lengthy summary, but hopefully helpful, and always happy, of course, to take any questions.
Thank you, Adrian. Yes, a very comprehensive report and, of course, very important subject. So I'm pleased that we're giving it the attention it deserves. So a couple of people already indicating. Adela.
Yeah, hi. I just wondered if you had any information on how our travelling community is coping during COVID-19 and, you know, whether how they've been affected by this, because I think that's equally as important to have that information.
Absolutely agree with you, Councillor Costello. I'm pleased to say, and this may, you know, this is, there will always be parts of every community that we may struggle to reach, but I'm pleased to say that our district and city partners, along with myself, have pulled together a range of arrangements to ensure that our traveller community, both in permanent dwellings, but also those that are on permanent sites, as well as standing up arrangements for those travellers that are coming through our county during the pandemic, are in place. We have rather a vulnerable, it's called a vulnerable persons working group. And it's probably not the best title actually, because it implies a deficit position. But that working group involves all of our district and city partners, but also a number of health colleagues, public health, the police, and so on. And it's identified a dozen or so different types of community members that may be more vulnerable to the pandemic, or indeed vulnerable to lack of information or misunderstanding, or whatever the issue might be, access to health services, the impact on their finances if they're furloughed or on 0 hours contracts. And one of those dozen or so groups was our Gypsy, Roma and Traveller community. And there is a very senior group of director level staff that are meeting about fortnightly at the moment to ensure that appropriate messages are being delivered, that where we need to provide some transit capacity for travellers that are moving through the county, that's provided safely, along with water, toilet facilities and waste facilities. And I think there's a further meeting coming up in the next few days to ensure that the test and trace arrangements are understood by that community. Now, as I say, the insurance policy, or the caveat here, is that there will always be parts of the community that we won't be able to reach. And I would really urge any of you and anybody else to let me know if there are any anxieties about that, and we will make sure that we put arrangements in place. But I feel really confident and satisfied that we're doing well on this, and we're not just going to end that kind of work when the pandemic is suddenly said to be lifted. There's too much positive action at the moment around our vulnerable groups, our excluded groups, including Gypsy, Roma and Traveller communities. And so the dialogue will continue, and I think that's very positive for our county.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. Councillor Machini, Elisa.
Hi, hello. Just a small number of questions. I just kind of started forgetting what to ask, so I wrote them down. They might not be in order, so I do apologize. The first one is about library incomes, which is mentioned in your financial implications in the section. So obviously this is perfectly understandable. You know, people aren't booking libraries or making use of the services in the way that you would if we weren't locked down. But I did wonder to what extent, I mean, this is, you know, a nationally relevant matter, and I was wondering to what extent any government funding is available, is being lobbied for, is being sought to compensate for this. So that's one question. I did wonder when you mentioned your work with Capalc and the fact that you have to sort of work specially with people, with authorities that don't have parishes. I mean, obviously Cambridge doesn't have parishes, but it has, it has a reasonably complex structure. And I was wondering, one of the things that have suffered, I suppose you could say suffered, from the lockdown is that area committees have been suspended, and there's been absolutely no convening of them at all. due to the fact it would be complicated to have a forum like that online. And I was wondering if you had any district-specific things to do with Cambridge City and area committees. About the track and trace, the report actually mentions, in a different section, it mentions scams. And it reminded me of a discussion that we had recently about the fact that how do we protect people in the county from scams related to track and trace? There's already been reports of people receiving phone calls from people that pretend to be track and tracers and are telling them to do all sorts of things. And I was wondering if we were, keeping an eye out for that sort of thing. And the last thing I wanted to say was I was very, very happy to hear about the work that we're doing with obviously the BAME community, but in general, I did wonder if both the track and trace system and all the work that we're doing with the BAME communities should have their own slightly larger space at the next committee or one of the next committees if we could have bigger reports, because I think those things are really important. And that, if I can decipher my handwriting, should be me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Machini. Chairman, I'll respond in order. So on the library income issue, that position is made up of a whole range of different income streams that our library service benefits from. That and along with all of our other costs are captured in a schedule that we provide to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government on a weekly basis. So a composite total of cost pressures and lost earnings is submitted to the Ministry along with every other council as part of a formal arrangement. So far, as you'll know, councils have received two significant payments to compensate for the pressures, the additional pressures that we are enduring. There is no information yet about any subsequent payments, but as you can imagine, our finance director is helping us control our spend as much as possible. We are looking at the consequences of these pressures if they're not recompensed to us. The background noise going on.
And one guy wearing sparkly boots has to be slapped into line, or the entire male race will collapse.
Can we all make sure we mute if we're not speaking, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to compete. So yes, we are looking at the impact of this in terms of our business planning, and we're looking at the way we might take our business planning forward to try and compensate for our losses if we don't get any further payments. So the process doesn't work as neatly as saying this is our pressure in libraries. Can we receive this back? It's more a composite approach that we take, and we submit that data weekly, and we'll see if there is a third or subsequent payments to come. Absolutely, in relation to Capalc, I do recognise that the city doesn't have a parish and town council structure, but we've been working incredibly positively with colleagues in the city council to support the operation in Cambridge City, which is based on, as you'll know, the ward boundary local response model. My hope, and I think it's the intention, is that that will continue in some form through the Think Communities work that will emerge from the COVID pandemic. So there's so many good and positive features about the way we're working now that we want to take those forward in a really renewed vigour through Think Communities, and that kind of localised approach that we're seeing in Cambridge City is part of that. I sadly don't have any information about when the area committees might stand up again, but be assured there is a very close bond between the county and the city through COVID that I think now is very strong and will continue beyond the pandemic, and we'll certainly want to support the city. And I know the Chief Executive is a proponent of Think Communities, as are her directors, will want to make sure that Think Communities really works for the city in the same way it does in parish areas. On the scams point, you probably saw me nodding. I think it is a concern. There are some reports nationally, not locally yet, of people who are being scammed. We've worked hard locally, as you know, to issue passwords for people. If they're contacted by the hub, we let them know they're going to be contacted and give them a password before we phone them. That isn't really the case with the national scheme. So the best we can do, and we will do, is to raise awareness and continue to do so of being alert to people that may be scamming. And our messages will include, simply putting the phone down and then contacting us or the local hub, should that be necessary, to check the validity of the caller. We'll take special note, now you've raised it today, Councillor Machini, to ensure that that's very overt in our comms work as we go forwards, both in relation to scams, but also in relation to test and trace, because it is a concern. And absolutely, on the final point, substantive items on test and trace at the next committee. I think we will be able to provide you with, I think, probably an overview of our intention in terms of the BAME work. Given the committee is only a fortnight away and the deadline for committee reports is very tight, it may not be as substantive as we would like, but certainly I think we can set out and describe our intentions. And for the August committee, we will certainly be able to talk much more substantively about our work in that area.
Thank you. Yes, that was very useful. And I didn't mean I want a full report in 2 weeks on everything, but just so that they are, they are given prominent place going forward. I think it's very important.
100% agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And certainly, Lisa, there's a lot of work going on, as Adrian said, with the BAME community in mind. And I know Gillian's pulling something together to make sure that everybody's kept up to date with that. So watch this space, I think, is the watchword for that. I've got Councillor Nieto next. Lena.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Adrian. As always, very comprehensive, and it's great to see all the work that we're kind of doing county-wide. I just had a couple of questions. So with the open new doors, we had a kind of a good number, but I wanted to know if that was kind of the number that we were expecting. I don't know how many people we were potentially targeting, but yeah, I just wanted to know what you thought about that number. Then I was also thinking about, because at the moment there's a lot of furlough staff across some of our partners, organizations, and of course the private sector. And I was just wondering if we're kind of doing any kind of work in this area to try and support residents that at the moment have been furloughed, but potentially facing redundancy. And if there was any kind of offer for adult learning opportunities to improve their, their current status, so they're ready for a job. So I just wanted to know if we're kind of doing anything in that area to try and support residents, and potentially, working with our partners, some of the districts. I know that they have been furlough some staff to see if there's kind of a cooperation between the organizations, such as, I don't know, maybe allowing them to apply to any of county council roles directly, obtaining, securing an interview, right? And then with I'm kind of watching the space for the BAM community, but it would be good to see what data we're using and how we're kind of analyzing that locally. And of course, it's really important to get in touch with all the local organizations that are in touch with that community, so that everybody is aware, and we're working very closely with those on the ground. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Again, I'll take them in order. So the Open New Doors scheme, just for everybody's benefit and as a reminder, is a new digital and physical skills, learning and opportunities scheme, particularly set up for people who are shielding initially. and it provides a wide range of opportunities for people to learn for pleasure or learn for skills, to interact with one another, to do family activities, particularly for the shielded population. And we set it up because we were so concerned that for 12 weeks, people were going to be very isolated potentially, and may have needed some activity to focus on. We think it's the only sort of scheme of its kind. It's matched up with a digital and a physical offer. So, for example, if somebody doesn't have access to a computer at home, but they still want to participate, if it's a live cookery lesson on a Tuesday morning, we make sure on the Monday somebody receives a recipe card and the ingredients so that they can feel that they're part of something that happens to be happening online somewhere else. So lots of different kind of nuances to this. And I'm actually really happy with the number so far. We did not have a target in mind because it was quite a risk to take. We had no idea really if this was going to land or not. That the numbers have translated into a decent take-up, and we will be looking to expand now the model beyond the shielded population. So really towards anybody that is vulnerable and may want to participate in this way and frankly learn in a different way. Our anxiety, like anything, is that when will people want to come back into a classroom, if at all? And there are so many different ways of learning and enjoying something. So the Open New Door scheme, I think we'll see becoming quite a mainstream opportunity. So if you think about what it's done so far as a bit of a pilot, my view is it's been a big success. The feedback is very positive. It's engaged people in different ways. Lots of things like scrub bags for NHS staff being produced as a result of it. Some great stories really that have emerged out of it. And importantly, more importantly than anything else, people who are shielded being given an opportunity to participate in something a bit different. So yes, I'm happy and we'll mainstream it. The issue of furloughed staff generally and the kind of economic consequences of the pandemic on families and individuals is dear to our heart, and obviously as a committee I know is of concern, and it does link back partly to the comment earlier around standing up the poverty working group, tackling poverty working group again. So one of the reasons for doing that is because this is a significant concern. But actually, and for your reassurance, it's a concern that's shared across our system of all of our partners. So in there's a recovery group called the Vulnerable Persons Recovery Group. But as part of that, we've set up a specific subgroup, which Oliver Morley, one of the directors at Huntingdonshire District Council, is leading, to specifically focus on the domestic economic consequences of COVID. And so people that have been tipped into perhaps universal credit or are becoming known to services for the first time as a result of the consequences of COVID, will be examined through this very short-term task and finish group. The intention is that this is a very rapid piece of work so that we can put in place, once we understand the scale of the problem, we can put in place solutions. Already those solutions include people being able to access free skills training if people want to learn new skills, to retrain for another job, another career, to improve even their earning power. That opportunity exists now, and I'll certainly make sure that I share with Oliver the other ideas that you've suggested, including the idea of fast tracking through our own recruitment process. There's something about being a good employer here ourselves and a good partner, and there's an awful lot of talent across our system that we wouldn't want to lose. But that group will, I think, do some good work, and in the whole issue around domestic finances being affected by COVID. And absolutely, the data on the BAME community will be far-reaching. What we'll do is make sure we share where we're getting that from. And the point around ensuring that we engage with people that know, I think is really fundamental. You know, and it's contained in the report, that we already have a community reference group, as it's called. There are about 30 or so partners that sit on that group. And again, like with many other features of COVID and our response, that's a group I think we would expect to continue well into the future, because it's dealing with and grappling probably for the first time as a collective group of partners with some really knotty issues. We've looked at things like mental health issues and have produced some incredible material actually around the availability of mental health provision. And this issue will form part of that group's discussion, as will in fact the economic issue that you mentioned earlier. Not every group clearly supporting the BAME community sits on the community reference group, but there are lots of groups on there that know of those groups, and we'll be making sure we use that network really carefully, really wisely to draw in that intelligence and information so that we're getting a fully rounded plan that emerges out of this. As with all of our work, we think local is best, and it's often those very local groups that are supporting small pockets of our community that perhaps we wouldn't ordinarily know about or hear from, that at a time like this we really need to be reaching out to. So we're going to use the CRG and other mechanisms to make sure that that happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. And just to add, I think we've got some learning from Peterborough as well, haven't we, that we can use. So.
Very, very much so. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So we've got Councillor Cuffley next. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everybody. And thank you, Adrian, for a great report and an in-depth report as well. I have, bear with me, maybe a bit all over the place, but I do have a few questions to ask. First and foremost, as you are fully aware, my passion is obviously domestic abuse and all kinds of abuse. So I have spoken with Stephen before about some of the things that you're proposing to put forward regarding domestic abuse. The issue that I'm having is after listening to the Chief Constable yesterday on the radio, laying claim that he's expecting a peak in reporting of domestic abuse. How is that going to be handled and dealt with, and what support is there out there for such cases? The other thing as well, which I was really interested in, is in the report, is especially with the current events of the racial stuff that's going on and the hate crime that potentially could happen with this, is there's no mention of anything about it in the report. I thought that I know we're in COVID-19 and we're in lockdown, but it's clearly going on. And I'm quite surprised there was no mention of it, to be honest. So I'd like to know exactly what, when we start the easing of lockdown, how we're going to deal with that and how we're going to move forward with that. You've answered a lot of the other stuff, but regarding domestic income, there were families there that were on low incomes already who were seriously struggling. They've now got holiday periods where they've been given a bit of grace to pay their whatever outgoings they have. But if you can't pay for them now, you can't pay for them tomorrow. So how are these families going to be supported with that on the financial side? What advice are they going to be given? What help are they going to be given regarding budgeting? On your library scenario, excellent, really glad in your house program. But there's a thing out there called broadband poverty, people who can't afford it. How are we going to address that? Because in the modern world, I can see that basically a lot of things are going to be going over to virtual discussions, meetings and events. This is going to disadvantage these people seriously. So what support will be given to these families who are on low income and can't afford laptops, smartphones or broadband? So there's that issue on that. I think that just about covers it, but I really, the only thing I was going to suggest is maybe better to talk outside of this meeting is some other issues you may want to consider regarding domestic abuse.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cuffley. I'll do these in reverse order to give Rob an opportunity to, I'm giving Rob fair warning here to respond to the domestic abuse and hate crime issues, and I know he would expect to do that anyway. So on the final 2 points you made, the domestic income issue, there is clearly at this stage no tangible answer, and that's one of the reasons we've had to set up a task and finish group, because we know that given the gravity of the situation and the impact on households, which is unprecedented, any solutions that did exist may not be appropriate or sufficient actually to meet the consequences. And you're absolutely correct. A delay is that. It's a delay. It's not a solution. So the delay is helpful, but all it does is buys time. So the work of the task and finish group that Oliver Morley will be leading becomes fundamental to this. I know he's already thinking about the consequences of those delays, things like deferred rental and mortgage payments, but I'll make sure that that's on the list. The other thing to draw your attention to is an announcement, I think probably last week now, from government of an additional, I think it was about £64 million nationally of funding to the local welfare provision arrangements that each council provides. In Cambridgeshire, that's called the CLASS scheme, the Cambridgeshire Local Assistance Scheme, which provides a whole range of support, practical support, as well as information, advice and guidance through our citizens advice colleagues. And we haven't yet got the guidance for that additional funding. We don't know how much will come to Cambridgeshire, but we are watching that very closely, and we'll ensure that we're responding locally to that demand. So the work of the task and finish group becomes really important, and I think it's equally relevant for the point you're making around broadband poverty. I think the issue around isolation is one thing, but actually you can be in a very urban area and still feel isolated because you can't afford things like that connectivity. And we know in turn what that means is that you can't often benefit from good household utility bill deals, for example. It's harder to switch tariff and so on if you can't maintain a digital footprint. So broadband poverty is also on the task and finish group's agenda as a challenge. We're also thinking through our CAMS 2020 work and the new vision for libraries, as well as Think Communities, that very locally based services. So the whole point of moving our staff down to the most local level is to ensure that there is a local presence for communities and citizens to be able to access services, but also to access things like digital connectivity. That's not ideal, I appreciate, but is another solution. If we can provide as much saturation of digital availability through CAMS 2020 and other work streams, then that's a helpful way of trying to plug some of the gap. But I think we'll see some really clear recommendations emerging on this from the task and finish group when it concludes its work, which might include looking to identify funding for provision of additional capacity. The government have provided already funding for us to provide laptops to school children across the county. So there's lots of work in this space being done. I think it's definitely recognised as an issue. And obviously, I think it does sound like, and I think this is the right thing to do, that we need to bring the task and finish group findings through this committee anyway, once it's concluded its work, so that you can influence what they look like. If I could perhaps turn to Rob now to pick up the domestic abuse and hate crime theme.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Councillor Cuffley. I'll start with domestic abuse because in terms of reporting over the past 3-4 months throughout the COVID period, we've actually been really surprised in Cambridgeshire that we haven't seen the spikes that have been encountered elsewhere in the country, which is really good news for us. Part of our concern around that, though, is that are we advertising the fact fully that we're still open for business, and do people feel they can still report? So a lot of work through the partnership, Domestic Abuse Sexual Violence Partnership, which I'm part of, our focus over the past few months has been about making sure we're getting those messages out. Lots of activity on the media, but also through some key areas where we think people will be going into and seeking support, such as doctor surgeries, etc., etc. So we've really pushed hard to make sure that people understand that actually we are still available. And one of the points I also want to make is that over the past 3 months, domestic abuse sexual violence services is one area that we've done everything we can to maintain, i.e. we've left all of our staff available on frontline roles so that they can be available for guidance and support to victims of domestic abuse. And I know that's been reflected across the partnership, particularly the police, who I work with very closely on this. So reporting hasn't gone up. We haven't seen a spike, but I think you're quite right to flag. We think that it will come at some point, and I know the Chief Constable has said that. So for us, it's about making sure that we're ready to be able to deal with that increase if it and when it comes. One of the things we've recently done is made sure that our risk assessment processes through something called MARIC is bolstered up to make sure that we've got more ability to actually assess cases as they come in and make sure that we assign frontline staffing to them, and we will continue that. Some other good news of the past couple of months is that the government have announced a continuation of funding for things that are really important for domestic abuse for us. The outreach services, Councillor Cuffley, we've spoken about these before, but a lot of the funding was due to stop in March. I'm really pleased to say we've got an extra year on that. So again, a lot of the third-party support is continuing, which is really good news for Cambridgeshire. So I think it is very much a case of us being able to respond to things as and when it comes forward. But I just want to give the committee the reassurance that we have actually put a lot of focus across the partnerships into domestic abuse, and will continue to do so. Before I move on to hate crime, is there any questions around that, Councillor Cuffley? No, great. In terms of hate crime itself,
that's really great. But I mean, the general feel that from when I'm going around talking to people is there seems to be a lack of support. Now, the problem you've got is I understand with isolation and distancing, it's a really awkward area. I've been doing whatever I can regarding social media to promote it. But I do think, generally speaking, I think there's a feeling that people are too frightened at the moment, and so the access of actually making those reports is very limited because they're being followed and they're being asked where to go, what they're doing, and why they're doing it. So I understand what you're saying, and I was aware of the extra funding. I did see the report. You can imagine I follow this subject quite closely. So. Good news that we've got the funding and everything, but I do think there's areas that we can still improve on. And if you want to have a conversation outside of this meeting, I'll have that conversation with you.
Certainly happy to have that, and just to reassure you that I'll take your comments back to the board, which I sit on. And just going a little bit further, I think we recognise it's about creating the environments where people can come forward. Isn't always necessarily the traditional routes, which is why we're looking at places like chemists and pharmacies and places like that where people can get advice and help if they need to as well. But we will continue with that, and it's very much a priority. In relation to hate crime, I haven't got as much of a detailed response for you on this, I'm afraid, Councillor Cuffley, but what I can say is that reporting of hate crime has not increased. In fact, it's gone down, and I fear that may be for the reasons that we've just said, that people aren't reporting through the COVID period. There is actually a partnership board behind hate crime, and with your support, what I'd like to do is go to them and actually get a more detailed update that I can bring back to you, and I'm happy to discuss offline as well. But I do know that we haven't seen particular spikes across this period. In fact, it's gone the other way, which is very unusual.
Chair, can I say
Thank
something?
you, Rob. Very helpful. Was it on that point, Lena?
Yeah, it was just regarding the internet access that
Right.
Councillor Cuffley was mentioning. I was just going to say, I'm sure that you've seen it, but this week the government launched a kind of a partnership with BT to help disadvantaged children, providing them fibre optic and broadband to be able to cover that area.
Yeah, it was really positive news. I've been invited to a seminar or webinar on it next week, should I say. So yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Rob. Got Councillor Batchelor next. Henry.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a quick comment more than a question, really, around the numbers regarding the shielded people at 2.7.2. It's more just to say thank you to Adrian really for including the additional percentages that I think I asked about at the last meeting of this committee regarding the percentages of people that are shielded in each district of the county. So I mean, I think we were just presented with the numbers in list 1 under that item, which would make it seem that, for example, East Cambridgeshire has the lowest percentage, but then when we now look at list 3, it would actually seem that Peterborough actually has the lowest percentage of people shielding for the number of residents they have. So, I mean, for me anyway, that was very useful to have that information. So just a quick slap on the back for Adrian for providing that.
Thank you, Councillor, much appreciated. Could do with a few of those.
Yes, people have been very appreciative of all your efforts, Adrian, so I'm sure we echo that. Councillor Smith, Mandy.
Thank you. First of all, brilliant report, very comprehensive, and I know you and your team are doing an amazing job. So, you know, well done.
It's very humbling.
No, you've done a brilliant job. I'd imagine it is humbling at times because, yeah, you go out there, you achieve something, you've helped somebody, I should imagine it is. Can I go back to the domestic abuse, like raised by Councillor Cuffley? Basically, in a way, it's good we're not experiencing the spike, but equally, yeah, I know there's people out there still struggling and still going through, you know, and it's how we reach them, I understand. And it is going to be more difficult than usual. I understand that as well. Do we know basically, I don't know if you do, but what's being done in other areas for them to have received the spike that we're not doing here? Is that possible for us to find out what they're doing and we're not doing? Maybe not.
So
Mandy,
Mandy, you're saying is the spike a positive thing because it means that they're getting reported there, basically, yes.
Yeah, there and not here. What's the difference?
So we have actually had that conversation at board level. I'd need to verify it with facts, but the general feeling from the panel members is that we absolutely maintained our frontline services, and we did an awful lot to advertise how to get support, whereas many areas stood down their activity, well, not entirely, but they certainly reduced the numbers. If it's again acceptable, I'll do a little bit more work behind that to see if I can come back with a more comprehensive answer.
I'm also quite happy to help. Clearly, this is Kevin Cuffley. He's the champion of this. I'm quite, you know, but there's going to be a few people out there really, really struggling by now, and it's how do you reach them? So I'm just wondering what is being done in other areas we're not doing here.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Councillor. I think we'll take you up on that offer. And
I'm not trying to tread on anybody's toes like the champion. So, you know, please don't think that, Councillor Cuffley. Okay.
Actually, it's Lena now, actually. So, but yes, perhaps Rob and Adrian, perhaps a briefing note with just a bit more detail when you get it would be helpful. Thank you.
And I think that comparison, or you know, the search across other areas, I think would be both regionally and similar councils, perhaps across the country, would be really interesting. There's a good network of, yes, you can imagine, of domestic abuse partnerships and constabularies. So we should be able to get that information, I think. And yeah, we can convert that to a briefing note with pleasure.
Did you just want to come in again, Councillor Cuffley, before we wind up? Your hand is up.
Thank you very much for that, Chair. It's just coming back to the point that Councillor Smith made is regarding areas. It'd be interesting if we could break down those stats as to urban and rural as well, because rural is a very easy place to hide when if you're a perpetrator. And so I would be very interested in knowing if what other rural areas are doing as much as the urban areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. So members, nobody else indicating, are we all happy that we've noted and commented the report? No dissent? Okay, thank you very much. So we'll say thank you very much for that report, Adrian and Rob. And we'll move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the Communities Capital Fund endorsement of recommendations. Ian Phillips, I think you're going to present, Ian. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and afternoon, everybody. 5 projects to talk to you this afternoon about. The first being in Sawtry, Coresco, the charity, who have been running the Man Cave for the last couple of years alongside the food bank. Manco has been going very successfully. It's a project that works with men in the area to repair and recycle items that are broken or electrical items. However, the project's been quite stifled from a lack of facilities, and recently have taken over a former county council building, which has needed quite a lot of work to get it up to standard. So this project is seeking 41,500 to do the electrical works, toilet, sanitation, kitchen, etc. That's going to make that facility a much more welcoming place, and can increase the amount of support that the project can offer to men in Sawtry and the surrounding area. Our next project is similar to a couple that we had at our last committee meeting. So outdoor play equipment at Stilton, the Parish Council there have put this application in, and have clearly been working with their community for a few years on the lack of play equipment in the village there. They talk about in their application the fact that parents often have to drive to other local towns and villages because there's not enough facilities within the area, and over the last couple of years the community have raised 12,500 towards this project, with the Parish Council also putting a further 10,000 towards the project, and therefore 37,500 is requested from the County Council to complete this project. Next two projects are fairly similar. Two small villages within Cambridgeshire, Winnick and Woodhurst, both looking to make small improvements for their village hall. Taking the first one, it's a rural community, and Village Hall plays a big part in that community. It's a two-stage project, which the first stage is pretty much completed by the community itself, and this project is just to look to finish off the upgrade of the hall. So new toilets, replacement windows, tables and chairs, and 20,000 is requested to support that project. The fourth one is the Woodhurst Village Hall, and again a small community where the village hall is no longer up to standard, and again needs new kitchen and toilets to make sure it's fit for purpose and can support the needs of its local community. That project's already raised 5,000 from its own community, and looking for 12,954 to complete. So then our final project is the first of our larger scale projects that we've been looking at, and this is at Campbell Town Council. Back in 2006, council worked with developers to develop a temporary youth building which was supposed to last just for 5 years. Unfortunately, it still stands today and is in a pretty poor state of condition, and as the town has grown, so has the need to use that facility, and frankly it's just not able to cope with the demand that it needs. And over the next few years, Campbell is going to increase growth, which will attract a significant amount of young people and families as those new houses are built and filled up. So this project is seeking to completely rebuild a youth facility that will provide all sorts of support and provision for 0 to 18 really, so anything from Beavers Clubs, Cubs Scouts, through to more dedicated and specific services. For example, Centre 33 are looking to use space there to support young carers. Romsey Mill have talked about one of their projects around supporting people with autism. So it will be a base from which young people can come together and use facilities, but also it will allow outreach work to take place to support the community. And there's a huge demand from residents for the building. A recent survey noted that 86% of residents felt that the current building was not fit for purpose, and that a new building would be well supported. So the project's already got 737,000 from match funding from the town council and the district council supporting, and is looking for a further 237,000 to complete the project. Fairly straightforward and a quick overview of the different projects that are forward for today for consideration, but happy to take any questions from anyone.
Thank you, Ian. I noticed the recommendations with the Campbell project say that we have some due diligence checks to do. Have they been done yet, or are they still outstanding?
They have almost been done, I think. We're just waiting for the final couple of things to be done from finance, but no issues that have alerted so far.
So we'll still need the recommendation to include that to make sure we've done that. So members, just a reminder, as discussed at the last meeting, all members of the committee and substitutes form part of the pool from which Ian can draw for the cross-party panels, because it's important that a member doesn't obviously do any scoring for a project that's within their division. And as I've declared, Woodhurst is in my division, and I didn't take part in the panel that dealt with that. So just so we know we're all available for that panel. So questions, Councillor French, Jan.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, I welcome this, and it really is nice to see that parish councils are going for their village halls and play equipment. I think this really shows this community fund is exactly what it is, community. I fully support them all.
Thank you, Jan. Councillor Batchelor, Henry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so just to say, I'll be supporting the recommendation today, but I did have two questions around the grant itself. I know from an email earlier this week that the grant's actually now depleted and we're not taking any more bids for this. So my first question would be, I mean, would it be possible for this committee to perhaps review the grant? Because to me, it would seem that either one, we're probably being too generous, or two, there's not enough money in the pot to start with. And the second question would be, would it be possible to perhaps maybe look for some additional capital funding for some of the projects that have been submitted but may not get funding due to all the money being given out already? So yeah, so it's just more of two questions around the fund itself rather than the specific applications we're looking at today.
Well, I'll just start with that, Henry, if I may, because obviously it was a decision from the leader to put the fund in place, and obviously there's there's a limit with the £5 million that's been agreed, so that isn't flexible in itself. And we did say obviously we would deal with the bids as they come in order. So once the £5 million has gone, it's gone. So that's really the way the system works. But we have said, and Ian is aware of this, and I'm happy for Ian to come in, that we will score all the bids that have currently come in up to the closing time, so that if we can help in any way, point people in the right direction to get other funding, or if more funding becomes available in the future, those people can be first in line, if you like, if they've scored well. So I think we'll go through the whole scoring process, but from the indications Ian's given of the amounts that's already in, it's unlikely they'll all get funded. But of course, not all bids are being approved. So we're a little unsure at the moment. Some aren't scoring high enough and aren't getting through. So how many would be refused, Henry, is just a bit unsure at the moment. But yes, I think the intention is we'll do all we can to help those bids that came in after the money's finished. Ian, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I suppose just to give a bit of context and overview, really, we've had about 60 applications in now, requesting some 9.5 million. Quite a few of those we are working our way through. I think with the recommendations today, we will have allocated only about $250,000. But by the time we come to our July committee, I'm anticipating putting in further projects to you, which will probably take us up to about 1.6. And then by August committee, my guess is that we will be fully allocated, perhaps one or two will stretch through to September, but no later. So there are quite a few projects that are already in the system, and we're going through them and looking at business cases, but we've still got some decisions to make. And just on your point about looking for other funding outside of the council, generally I would say that's absolutely something that we should be doing. However, we do know that a lot of those funding opportunities at the moment are paused because of COVID. So lottery, for example, are not taking any new applications yet for general capital build, but that will start to open up again soon, I think. So we will be looking to support different success or strong looking projects with other avenues where we can.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Yes, point well made, Henry, because we do want to support these community projects if we can. So we'll do all we can. Councillor Cuffley, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's probably a bit of clarity, and because I wasn't present, and a lot of the detail is obviously sensitive, but have a lot of these projects, I mean, due to the fact they are community art projects and village halls and things like that, has there been an application, or have they used S106 money as well to help fund these projects?
Where available, yes. So, for example, Stilton Parish Council have put some of their 106 through, I think, a support project funding for this. Campbell certainly has. The other two, Winnick and Woodhurst, haven't. But in more generally, as a lot of our projects are via town or parish councils, and quite a lot of them are using 106 money as match funding.
And quite a few small villages, of course, don't have any development, so they don't have access to Section 106 funding. Okay, Kevin. So, Councillor Nieto next. Lena.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say how it's overwhelming, this funding for our communities, because we're seeing really good projects that are coming forward, and by approving them and not having kind of all the really bureaucratic measures that other kind of funds have, we're going to be able to see some of the projects that have been working for years kind of completed. So I think communities are delighted. So I wouldn't want to see any more kind of bureaucratic or a much more stricter procedure. I think what we have right now, I think is it is really good. Yeah.
Thanks, Lena. Any other comments, members? Okay, thank you very much. It sounds as if everybody's supportive. Are you all happy if we take them on block? In which case, it's only me that's declaring an interest, so I'll abstain from them all if you're happy, and we'll just take them all on block. If there's any objection, can you raise your hand? Lena, perhaps you'd take your hand down. Good. Any objections to us taking them on block? Okay, nobody showing. So we'll go to the recommendation that those bids are, and I'll just run through them. Approve the following applications for funding. Caresco, £41,500 for repairs and upgrade to Sawtry Man Cave. Stilton Parish Council, £37,500 for new playground equipment. Winnick Village Hall, £20,000 for upgrades to the Village Hall. Woodhurst Village Hall, £12,954 for upgrades to the Village Hall. And Campbell Town Council, £237,000, subject to the completion of due diligence checks for Campbell Youth Building. So I'm going to take those as approved unless anybody shows dissent with their raised hand. Nobody showing? Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So those bids are approved, and obviously we'll look forward to seeing some more bids at the next meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Ian. So we move on to item 6, community champions all updates, and obviously been quite a difficult time for community champions to be doing their normal routine. But is there anybody that would like to give a report? I'm aware that Councillor Every has submitted a written report which will be appended to the minutes. Are any of the other champions wishing to report anything?
Yeah, hi, Steve. I've also submitted my report. Again, as you rightly say, it's very difficult to do our jobs at the moment, but I have been supporting local groups in the applications to the Capital Fund, helping village halls in my area and community centres to access the HDC business grant. looking forward to the libraries opening again so we can get Essentials by Sue off the ground again, which will be brilliant. And then finally, just to say that Hamerton Wildlife Park opened its doors on Monday, and there was a great deal of excitement. Well, all the zoos opened their doors, but as you know, I've been supporting Hamerton throughout this situation. So let's hope. And when I spoke to them on Tuesday, they'd had a really good day on Monday and Tuesday, members only. And then today they were opening up to the general public. So let's hope it just gets better from here on in.
Yeah, thanks, Adela. I know that was a big concern of yours, so yes, thank you. Councillor Machini, Elisa?
Oh, yes. Just to say, yes, it's, as of today's date, I've been in the job again for like a month, and it's not been a normal month in that sense, but there's a lot of work going on in Cambridge around, mutual aid support groups and, the establishment of buying clubs for people to support each other in getting stuff delivered to their doors. It's all extremely wonderful. So I'm doing a lot of that. And I'm also trying to start. Why is Ian doing what he's doing? Sorry. I'm also trying to start. There's an initiative around trying to reach out to people who are not online in order to expand their access to certain online communications and meetings and things that might be useful to them. What I was planning to do, I haven't seen her at this meeting, but I'm going to set up a meeting with Elaine to try and get some pointers and advice on how to carry on doing this role whilst it's very different from when I was in this job for a year, 3 years ago. It wasn't like this. So it would be, I look forward to getting stuck in properly.
Thank you, Elisa, and fingers crossed we'll be back to normal as soon as possible. So yes, but I know how enthusiastic you were last time, so I'm sure you continue it this time. So yeah, thank you, Elisa. Councillor French, Jan.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, obviously it's a difficult time, but I think with the fantastic volunteers we've seen over the last few weeks, hoping when it's over we can set up some time banking in Finland, man caves. I've got quite a lot of people very interested in that, so fingers crossed on that one. One of the big problems, or one of the biggest issues with my emails and messages from people, we seem to be having a rat explosion across the country. I don't know whether it's just Finland, but environmental services obviously are exceptionally busy. I don't know whether we had a mild winter. There just seem to be well, millions of rats about. As I say, I don't know whether that's a county thing or is it just an individual. I mean, obviously March has got a river and we've always got rats around the river, etc., etc. We're very fortunate. We've got some great volunteers up here. We've had quite a few residents making hand-stitched face masks, dropping off at the hubs and the food banks, which is really great. And I just think everybody's done a fantastic job, and I think we really need once again to say well done, Adrian. You've done an absolutely sterling job, and I hope you enjoyed your holiday last week.
Thanks, Jan. I can assure you that Adrian was still using emails last week, even when he shouldn't have been, but never mind. So thanks, Jan. And yes, volunteers have been fantastic across the whole county, I agree. So really been good working with them. So yeah, brilliant. Any questions for our community champions members? No? Okay, thank you very much. So yes, thank you. So if you could just make sure you've a brief written report so that Nick can append them to the minutes, that'd be great. Thank you. So we move on to item 7, the Communities and Partnerships Committee Agenda Plan. Adrian, are there any changes to the published plan, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a couple, actually. So for July's meeting, as well as the kind of focus that we've agreed during the committee today on test and trace and reference to our forward plan on BAME, we want to continue to leave the item on the voluntary and community sector contract update on the agenda, but we were going to bring you the specification for agreement for going out to the market. So this is the continuation of our Support Cambridgeshire contract. In light of our experience during COVID, we'd like to take stock of what we feel now is actually needed going forwards into whatever a new normal looks like for us. And the Support Cambridgeshire contract has really come into its own during the COVID pandemic, but there are, we think, many, many more opportunities to think about how that might work. So what we'd like to bring to you in July is a request to extend the existing contract and instead bring to you in September a full report on the specification and our recommendations for where we go next with Support Cambridgeshire, with a view to making it more of an outcomes focused approach to working with communities and residents in line with our Think Communities ambition. So that's the first change. The second change is the Cambridgeshire Libraries implementation and delivery of a new vision report, which was to be a scheduled update report. We'd like to move that down to October. We're not bringing update reports through committees at the moment. And what I'll make sure we do in July is include in the COVID report a full update on the recovery plans for our public library service, so that members can be reassured. And Councillor Costello mentioned it, I think a couple of other members have mentioned it today. It's an important service which we need to get up and running again as quickly as possible. So I'll make sure in the July committee we'll include reference to libraries in the COVID report, but actually we'd like to defer the full update report on the new vision to October, please, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Any members have any questions on the agenda plan? Okay, nobody indicating. Thank you very much. So that's the end of the agenda. Thank you, members. So the committee is due to meet next on the 2nd of July, just 2 weeks from now, and the arrangements for this meeting will be confirmed nearer the time in the light of the current situation. Thank you all for attending and watching this meeting, which I now declare closed. Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair.